had set all this up. There we go.
All right. So how does innovation affect the success of the company? Well, it affects the company greatly, basically, hugely. So you can, if you want to, take these off. If you want to save a bag of money, then innovation is the way to go, because it'll generally knock the pants off anything else you can do. So if you want to get savings in, so my last job was COO, Chief Operations Officer of Woodside. So we would spend, my budget was about $1.5 billion a year, operating costs, and about 500 million capital costs. And when you looked at those spends, you could save a bucket load of money by innovating, compared to trying to make somebody work a bit faster or some other crazy idea like that, right? So you'll only get a marginal benefit if you're trying to squeeze something out of the workforce. But if you can innovate, you can save a pile of dough. So I'll give you a very simple example.
Yes.
Very quick, simple example of an innovation. I'll go on to a more serious one. But if you have a look at the, do you want me to show you something on the computer?
Of course.
Okay, so let's go here. What's the name of those guys? Christ. Man, life, this is slow.
See that file? Oh, there it is.
See ya.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Of course.
Never heard of this company before.
No. They make these vehicles. You can see that, and it's got a little camera on it. Now I'm just wondering whether they've got a.
Is that for like the AFL?
Hey?
They use that in the football?
They probably do, but.
Where is it saying?
That's security. Services, what's the point of that? So these are unmanned aerial vehicles. There we go. So, let me go back. This is a good one. This is a general.
Cyber Technology is the industry leader in complete UAS solutions. Based in Australia, Cyber Technology has developed a dedicated training course for level 1 multi-rotor remote pilots in response to the explosive
and just
industry
they're
demand.
taking that footage right now.
Through extensive consultation with the Civil Aviation Safety Authority.
So that's drilling for oil.
No, that's not drilling.
Oh.
That's producing. So we go back here just so that you can see what I'm
Industry
talking
demand.
about.
Develop.
All right. So if you have a look at that, you can see that what you've got here is a flare tower. That's quite tall. This is on Rankin A in off the Northwest Shelf. Go back a little bit further, and you can see that's the platform there.
Yep.
So they produce oil and gas, well, mainly gas through this, And then if you have a look, this is the flare tower. So it's right at the end of that. And that's fairly tall. So that there would be probably, I don't know, 60, 70 metres tall. So if you want to inspect that, see how that flare tip is weathering, and that flare tip is about this diameter.
Right.
You've got to actually first shut down production, because you can't send somebody up there while the flare is alight, as it is there. That's very hot. So when you get to about, you can feel that flare even when it's just on pilot. That's just pilot, that's just normal flaring at the minute, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you get to about here, you can feel the radiated heat just from a lazy flare like that. If that thing goes off and it really dumps all the contents of the platform up through that, which it's there to do in the event of a safety incident, which can happen in a flash, that thing goes off. There's a candle that's about 90 metres high. It's huge, which is why it's so far from the platform. So there's a lot of radiated heat from that. Anyway, upshot of it is, if you need to inspect it, or when you need to inspect it, you've got to shut down production because you can't put people at risk. Secondly, it's a whole job getting people up there. You've either got to scaffold or dick around before you can actually get up there to do your inspection. So if you have a look at their little footage, that footage was taken by their, see how good that is?
Oh yeah.
Right, so even better than that, they're able to, they've got really high resolution cameras, and they can get right in and take really high resolution pictures from, even if that thing got cooked, doesn't matter. So you can buy a new one for 20 grand. So if you had to pay them out because the thing got cooked in an incident, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Nobody's hurt.
Yeah.
No big deal. And it's cheap.
Yeah.
So that's a really good way of demonstrating a job that would cost you maybe 200, 250 grand, maybe more.
Just to check it.
Just have a look. Is going to cost you maybe something like $30,000, $40,000. So huge difference. That's in operating cost.
Yeah.
Now, what else did you ask me? So that's a simple example. What role does senior staff member have in? Well, I was a COO, so I used to encourage that kind of stuff. So you'd be constantly talking about it. I want to see just two ways you can do it. You squeeze your guys, so save costs. You buggers, off you go, do something better. And so they're always off looking for. But something like that requires you to take that particular example. You don't have to take much risk. So it's low risk. So it's almost a no-brainer. But there are other examples where people are going to try something a bit different. You think it's going to save money, but it may not. So you encourage them to take risk.
Well, the next question is pretty much.
Yeah, so that one there was pretty interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
There's other things that if I had to explain them to you, boy, you're shitless. But they, I've invented a few things over the years that have saved a bucket load of money. But that was when I first joined.
Can you tell me about a drill that you invented?
Oh yeah, that's right.
That was.
Yeah, it's too hard to explain.
Ah.
You can show you a picture,
Oh.
but it won't mean anything to you. It's not really a drill. It's part of the drilling, the well building or the well construction process. But it's unless you really understand. Well, I can show you. I think I've actually got a little slideshow that shows it. Somewhere in here, there's a picture of Tim, because Tim works offshore now.
Oh yeah, Monique, I remember him. Met him once.
Yeah, he works offshore
Did I meet Ben?
on a drilling rig. And it's not there. Put it somewhere. Anyway, that's maybe it's in here. And maybe it's not there. But Anyway,
It's alright.
it's too hard to explain.
Yeah.
I'll be here telling it forever before we. Anyway, the better one there is how do you encourage junior staff? Basically, that way is to just try things. Get out there, have a go. We want to save money, and the best way to save money is to innovate. Fastest, not necessarily the fastest, but you'll save the biggest amount of money is by innovating. Like that one there, orders of magnitude. So instead of saving maybe 5 or 10%, so if you think about it, how can we get our guys to do a particular task better? Well, they can speed it up a little bit, but you're only ever going to get a few percent out of it. The guys can only work so fast. If you can innovate, so maybe you can do away with the task altogether, which is what I just showed you, right? With the flare tower inspection. So rather than it costing you something like $250,000, you've reduced it to a tenth of the cost, maybe 25 grand, something like that. So that's how you encourage your junior staff, and you also do it by rewarding them. I used to do a monthly, what we'd call a town hall. Not every month, probably every 2 months. We'd do a town hall. We'd get all the division together, my division, which is a few hundred people in Perth, and we would go through aspects of the business, and then we would actually give out awards to guys who had done something special. And we'd give them something like this,
Oh yeah.
So you'd give out, actually, that's what we used to give out, was that there. So it's not, see it there, EVP Production Award. So guys love, there's no monetary value in that, but they love getting something like that. So reward and recognition, that's how you would basically get.
Was there ever a financial bonus or something in as well?
No, we never did. That's part of your job, so I'm not into that. I just basically it's a job to innovate. You're an engineer, for crying out loud. Innovate. Yeah. If I've got to pay you more money to innovate, then that's crazy. I'm already paying you to innovate. Yeah. That's your job.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, but we would reward them, and sometimes it'd be a team effort. So you'd give them a letter, and you'd say, "There's $500. Go out and have a meal together." Or sometimes just a guy done a great job. Take your wife out for dinner, something like that. So that's how we used to encourage people to do it. So, what are the priorities starting a new idea when what is the priority when starting?
What means that when you first start a project?
Yes.
What happens first? What's the when you innovate when someone has the idea,
yeah.
How do you run with it? How do you run with it initially? So.
Yeah, well, you've got to basically make your case. So that's a really good question, actually, because a lot of young engineers get really frustrated when I've got this idea, but no one, my ideas never get up. Well, no shit, Sherlock. At the end of the day, an idea is just an idea. What you've got to do is build it into a case. So you've got to make a case. And sometimes people get frustrated because people aren't listening to my ideas. Well, okay, make a case. So the case is, what's the benefit? Right. Generally, it'll be a financial benefit. So how much is this thing going to cost? In that case, it's going to cost you about 25 grand to do this. Oh, good. So why would I do it? Because the alternative is costing you 250 grand. Oh, okay, that's great. But where do I get one of these things? Oh, you can't get one, they've not been invented yet. Well, okay, you mean we've got to go and invent it? Yeah, and there's development costs. How much is that going to cost? Oh, probably about $4 million. Get nicked. We don't want to do that, right? Or we don't have to do anything. They're right here in Balcatta, which is the case here. Yeah. You don't have to do any of the development. They've already got them. Brilliant. You mean they can come out and do this job just as it is? Nearly. Because in oil and gas operations, you've got to be intrinsically safe, meaning you can't have stuff that sparks, that could set off. So they had to modify but they wanted this business, and so they were targeting refineries in oil and gas, and they worked towards getting their machinery intrinsically safe. So again, they couldn't deploy it straight away, they had to wait until these guys got intrinsically safe. But an engineer who's doing something like that would work with them to get it to the point where it could be used. You know what I mean?
I see, right? Yeah.
So if you can't deploy it exactly as is, you would work with them, and that would be part of your case. you'd make your case. We can't use it right now, these are the reasons why, but in 6 months' time, once blah, 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 blah is done, we could use this thing. You got to make a case.
Gotcha.
So it's really an economic case. What are the, and you would have to build up the risks and all that. So that's really how you go. You go from idea, you start to make your case. All right. What is the priority? What slows down the innovative process? Probably a lot of the time I think it's people saying, oh, we've tried that before, we tried something like that before, and so they'll shit can the idea just because we tried that before. So they just are negative about it. Or they're risk averse.
Oh, so they don't like taking risks. It's got to be safe.
Oh, that's it. You know, not necessarily safe. It's just there's so much bother. You know, and that's a big challenge for young engineers. I've found that all my career. I've always tried different things, and trying to get around your bosses sometimes can be quite difficult. But you need to be a bit clever about how you do that too. But that can be a real problem, getting around a boss who's not so willing to take a chance, just likes everything nice. And people like that. A lot of people just like stuff to be nice and safe, nice and easy, don't bother me, you know, let's not rock the boat. Because if you're trying something new, what's the risk? What's the main risk?
Money.
It may not work.
Oh, right, yeah.
So the thing might fall on its bum.
Yeah.
And now we all look stupid, and people don't like looking stupid.
Yeah.
Do you have any problems with the theft? No, not really. Very hard to protect your IP. So protecting intellectual property is really hard. I can't remember Woodside having a real problem with it per se.
Because there's like, if you have an idea at the very beginning, and it might take 3 years for it to get into full, you know, like you said before, that thing might take an extra 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, what's stopping
someone else
coming in?
Very little. I think one of the things, like a big company like Woodside, there wasn't a lot of big IP that we had that you really wanted to protect, you know. And the stuff that we did have would only be stuff that big companies would try and do, and generally they lay off. But I'd invented that thing that Tim, you know, was involved in. You know, I'd invented that, and I spoke to a mate who'd invented things too, who was in the US. And I said, should I go ahead and patent this? He said, don't bother. He said, you know, people will just change it a little bit, and it's impossible to protect. But anyway, no, Woodside didn't have a lot of trouble. What are the cross-cultural policies, and did it affect innovation?
So I think it was Aboriginals ever sort of like, they said you couldn't do it a certain way, or you had to work around Aboriginals, or just any sort of.
Not really. It wasn't so much innovation as you had to change the way you were doing things. So I can't recall of us actually having to innovate in order to get around cross-cultural issues. You just had to do things differently. So rock art on the Burrup Peninsula is a big one. You know about the rock art?
Is that I've heard of it.
So on the Burrup, there's all this rock art. It's like 40,000 years old. So there's, inscriptions that have been done somehow by somebody. You know, I guess the ancestors of the Aboriginals had done it. I would assume, although there's some debate about that, actually who did it. But anyway, all of these things, pictures of wallabies and fish and all kinds of things, with spectacular stuff. But there's a lot of sensitivity about touching that. It's everywhere on the Burrup, and of course we've disturbed the Burrup enormously, Woodside and everybody else. But when we just did Pluto, we had to be very careful about identifying all the rock art, moving it out of the way before for where we're going to put the plant. And in some places we sort of redesigned the plant so that we wouldn't leave some areas undisturbed. That wasn't innovation, just doing things differently. So it wasn't any real big deal. And I can't think of any other things where we really innovated because of that. We're very significant cross-cultural policy you had to adhere to during the project. Yes, enormously. Mainly rock art's probably the biggest one I can think of. You know. So rock art, you can't disturb it, and if you are going to disturb it, then you've got to do that with a lot of
I
cultural
might
sensitivity.
close this because
Yeah.
it makes
Oh yeah,
use I just fear it might
bugger up your thing.
ruin the
Yeah, your pickup, it might too. Was there any? Okay, so I've covered that. Rock art is probably the most significant one that I can think of around Indigenous stuff. That would be the biggest one for sure. Was being environmentally friendly a priority for Woodside? Yes. Oh, so that's enormously important in a lot of areas. One of the biggest things that we changed along the way was in the offshore drilling process, you use a drilling fluid, drilling mud, which circulates around the wellbore as you drill. So if you can imagine, you've got a drill bit at the end of a drill string, you pump the drilling fluid down the inside. As the drill bit cuts, it flushes the cuttings, comes up the annulus that you've created up the top. You screen the cuttings out of the drilling fluid, and it gets circulated back down the inside. So it's a continuous loop, right? You understand that?
Yes.
And you're drilling, depending on the length of the well, anything. I mean, Woodside's drilled wells that are 8 kilometres long. So the composition of that drilling fluid is very, very important. It's very tightly managed. So you've got specialists on board a drilling rig who are there just to monitor and manage the drilling fluid. These guys are generally degreed, so they have a science degree or something like that, or chemical degree, chemistry of some description. The fluids that really help you manage the wellbore and give you a really good wellbore are oil-based. In the old days, it used to be based on diesel. But you can imagine once that fluid gets to the surface and you're screening it, and then the cuttings could get dumped overboard. If they're covered in diesel or another oil, then they're dumping into the ocean, and you've got this oil and this sheen hitting and then the cuttings settle to the seafloor, and you've got this oil seeping out of them. Furthermore, if you've got any kind of leakage from that drilling system, you're getting oil into the water. And it wasn't uncommon when I started my career. You'd see a drilling rig drilling, and there'd be this long sheen of diesel-based fluid out.
I've seen pictures of that.
Yeah, right. So we still use those fluids, but we use them less than we used to, and we're much more sensitive to what happens to the cuttings and to fugitive, what do we call them? I was going to say fugitive emissions, that's not really the correct term, but we worry a lot more about leaks, seeps, weeps and that kind of stuff. But the first thing we do is try and engineer different drilling fluid systems, and you can get water-based systems now, which they don't perform anywhere near as well, but in a lot of circumstances, they're not a bad alternative, and you don't get the environmental issues, carry a pile of risk. So that's why companies will tend not to use them if they can get away with it, because you can lose the wellbore while you're drilling, whereas if you're using the oil-based systems, it's a whole lot more robust, if you like. You're not likely to have wellbore damage. You're getting what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But big difference in risk mainly. The oil-based systems are a lot more costly, but things don't go wrong. The water-based systems are cheaper, but are huge and more environmentally friendly, but a pile of risk. So it's a real risk. It's a real risk
analysis.
That you've got to do, and we used to do this all the time because we'd try very much to use the water-based systems where we could, and we'd use the oil-based systems by default. You talk to Tim, talk to him about using oil-based systems on the rig as a rig hand, and he hates them. The other thing about them is that they're bloody filthy.
They smell.
He hates the fumes, and he actually worries about whether there's a cancer risk that comes with it, and I don't blame him. It's it is.
It is a carcinogenic, or
There are elements that are carcinogenic, yeah. So it's not really friendly stuff, even from a health and safety perspective. I wish I had all those damn pictures. I thought I would have had them right here, but I don't. It's a bit crap. I wonder where they've gone. Disappeared into the archive here somewhere. Disappeared. They weren't here, were they? Because we looked there.
no, I don't think you clicked. I don't recognise these photos. Oh, no, I recognise those photos. Yeah.
Because I was looking at them just the other day. So that's a really interesting. That's a really interesting example of risk reward for using something around, trying to do the right thing by the environment. That's a classic one.
Which one was more profitable, like from a purely profit sense, or like speed of?
The oil-based systems. So I used to make my team. Our approach was to use water-based systems, and we would only go to the oil-based systems if we really had to. But man, did that require a lot of work. But there were other drilling teams that their default was oil-based, and only when they thought. So you can come at it two ways. You can say, Roddy, I'm going to use oil-based as my basis, and then when I think it's really safe to do so, I'll do the environmentally friendly thing. What we did is that we will always use the environmentally friendly thing, which is the water-based, and when we really think we can't make that work, then we'll go to oil-based. So we came at it from another direction. It just depends on your risk appetite. That's all.
I see.
Have there been any major innovations in safety? Shit, yes. Heaps. How many do you want me to talk about?
Yeah, it was a question straight out of it's sort of like a compulsory question. I know that there's so many
areas.
Because the next question is just spoon-fed, something about where it's come from since you started.
Well, just enormously. Innovations in safety are huge. If you take the drilling game, when I started, it wasn't uncommon. We would fly a guy off probably every fortnight for a serious injury. So I'm talking about loss of fingers, mashed hands, broken legs, broken arms. Fatalities were not uncommon. So the injuries were very, very serious. Those are rare now. Even
they make the news.
Yeah, they would make the news. That's right. So it's very rare. And what have we done? Well, a lot of stuff's been automated or mechanised. So just getting people out of the way. So it's now being done by machinery rather than people. So that's one big innovation. So that's just using machines to do what was done manually. Another one is just the whole psychology of safety on board. So people are taught and encouraged to do things in a better way and not take risk. There's a whole range of procedures and approaches that are done to ensure that guys don't do things the wrong way. So rather than a simple example, you've got to reach up something at heights. You don't just get a barrel or something and go and stand on it and reach up. You would probably lose your job or be severely disciplined if you did that. So you'd have to get a ladder. The ladder or scaffold up. The ladder would have to be a proper ladder, not some, make-do ladder.
Oh, yeah.
So you've got to get a ladder that's right for what you're trying to do. It's got to be fixed properly, so it can't be sort of half. All of that kind of stuff. So everybody, and if you get up to a certain height, you've also got to have a lanyard, full restraint, that's hooked on somewhere, so that in the event that ladder toppled over, you're still hooked on and you're not going to finish up, falling to the ground. So all of these things have come around. There's a myriad of procedures and approaches. Lifting gear. All your lifting gear has to be certified, inspected, certified, and that's got to be done routinely. Depending on the gear, it'll have a different validity period for the certification. Generally it's a year, but this is all your lifting, slings, shackles, bolts, the whole 9 yards, chains. Once upon a time that wasn't the case, and there was a lot of very serious incidents that occurred because lifting gear would fail. So people might have been doing the right thing, but you're not allowed to walk under loads. So if you see people walking under a load offshore, you won't ever see that. People won't allow you to do that. So the crane operator is very aware of that. The dogman is very aware of it. So even though you've got certified gear, you know, we've examined the lift, we've worked it all out properly, you still aren't allowed to be underneath load. You watch a building construction site around town, you'll see people walking under loads all the time. All the time.
Why is it different in the
because they don't have the same approach to
right.
safety. And then go and have a look at the statistics for how many guys get killed on building sites in Australia in any year, and it's a lot. And that's because they don't have these approaches. So in the oil and gas industry, you've got, you know, all the right things in place, but even then they say, if that were to fail, we don't want you to be in harm's way, so you don't walk under.
Why is oil and gas a
That's a very interesting question.
Why do they?
It's just because the attitude is different. So when I started my career, it had begun a few years before I started. So I started in 81, and the attitude had started to change. So this was just senior leaders in the industry saying, this is no longer the way we want to be. We want to be better than this. We can't be killing, hurting people the way we are. And it just started to change. So the oil and gas industry, particularly offshore, has been way ahead. The miners have started to catch up. So they're starting to be like that. They're a bit further behind.
Yeah.
And the building industry is in the dark ages. So they are way behind. You just have a look, just watch.
Yeah.
Have a look. You'll see people without full restraint. Sometimes you'll see them with it, sometimes you won't, depends. Depends on the building site, depends on the builder. A union's involved, not involved, you know, so a whole range of things.
Right.
Okay, what other questions did we have? What is the process of telling other international...
So this one, if you innovate something in the top levels, how do you tell your, not just like directly under you, but obviously you had people under you. Yes. So how did you get it to be?
I used to use, in my department, I used to have a weekly learning meeting. So we'd get the top 100 leaders in my division, would come together Thursday morning to the learning meeting. So it was at 9:30 every Thursday morning. It used to run for an hour and a half. And Karratha would call in, and Pluto up in Karratha would call in too. So you'd have them calling in, so they'd be on the screen, and we would go through a set agenda. We would look at what incidents have we had, and we would discuss what we'd learnt from them. And then people would tell other stories around what they had done that were worth sharing for the learning value, which is what's called a learning meeting, right? Now, where you had big innovation, like that flare thingo, somebody would present that. So it'd only be a 5-minute thing they'd put up. We just did this on Rankin, blah, blah, blah. And someone would say, shoot, I could use that same thing for something else, something completely unrelated, but it would get people thinking. So we would always present any innovation, any new technique that we did, we'd present at the learning meeting, and then that would be discussed and it'd get people thinking. And then they'd know who had done it, so they'd have someone that they could go talk to, who could help them put them together with the contractor, whoever it was that supplied the service or whatever it might be. I found that a really great way of doing it. People come up with all kinds of weird and wonderful IT fixes. You know, you can buy this application which, you know, for sharing all this crap. I found they don't really work. People don't tend to go in there. This was great.
Yeah.
Hands on, you come into every week you'd come into a, theatre style setup. The other sites would call in, and you're all there. We encouraged open debate, and sometimes there'd be ferocious debate about things, particularly if something had gone wrong. We're talking about something that had, seriously gone wrong, and people would then start arguing, well, why did you do that? How come that was like, why didn't you do this? And there'd be real testy debate sometimes. It was good. Everybody sharpened off each other.
Right.
I used to love the learning meetings. It took me a long time to get those working though. How does Woodside keep ahead of the competition? Well, one way is not to make dumb decisions. So Woodside has a very strong cash flow, and right now they're cashed up heaps. I say that seriously. People with a lot of money can go ahead and buy things, and they actually wind up costing you in the end. So a lot of companies will do that when they're cashed up. So Woodside's elected not to do that. They're not going to just go buy something for the sake of buying it, or do a project just for the sake of doing it. It's got to be demonstrably worthwhile. So at the moment, they're giving all the profits back to, most of the profits back to the shareholders. So dividends are high coming out of Woodside, and that's why they're doing it. So firstly, don't make stupid mistakes. Don't do stupid things. But secondly, they do have a department that's dedicated to innovating and doing things differently. So looking at different ways. So FLNG, which you would have heard about, Shell's technology, Woodside's looked at that, because Woodside and Shell were looking at that 15 years ago when Shell first started to develop it. Woodside's looked at their own versions of FLNG, and they've looked at other things too. So they've got a department who's tasked with looking at these big ideas, not the little ones like I showed you, that flare thingy, but really big changes. And how do recent innovations help with future innovations? Well, Pluto LNG you've got scratched in here. Why have you got that in there?
We went onto the Woodside site, and it seemed to be a major project.
It's a $15 billion project.
Yeah.
The big thing about Pluto LNG was that it was built. It was modularised. So Train 5, when Train 5 was built on the Northwest Shelf, basically right next door to where Pluto was built, while Train 5 was being built, or just as we were getting onto the building of Train 5, there was real shortages in labour, because there's the boom was right on.
Oh yeah.
Someone came up with a bright idea, and what we used to do was bring all the steel to site, and then whack it together, sort of weld it together, bolt it together on site, and then you'd put all of the stuff. Woodside website. So, if that's the way you're building things, it's very labour intensive. Right. That's probably a good one. Where did it go? There we are. So that's Pluto there, and this is a really good example because you can see it quite clearly. You see how that looks like a truss or a box section? Mm-hmm. Right. So inside that is pipe work. Here's this big pipe rack.
Right.
And it's the same construction. These were all built, and if you that one there, you can probably see it on this picture. Yeah. That pipe rack I just showed you runs from there, runs down the hill, and then runs all the way out here down to the storage. But anyway, they're huge. Now, normally speaking, well, you can see it. You can see how it's all boxed up like that.
Yeah.
Normally, they're not built that way. They're built as I'm just trying to. Let's Pluto again. So on the old Northwest Shelf. LNG trains, instead of building it like that, what they would do is you'd build a rack, you put that across, and the pipe work would all be sitting in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get it? The way these were built for Pluto is you had this big box construction, and then the pipe work was all put inside it, and this was all done in Thailand
Okay.
and Korea.
Oh, my sister works for Shell, and a lot of things are happening in South Korea. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So depending on where the construction contract was. So what happened immediately is you got rid of your labour problem here, because it's all using labour in a shipyard or a construction and fabrication yard in Korea or wherever you could get it done. Korea, Japan, well, it was just Korea and Thailand mainly. And so they're also fitting it out with all the pipe work. So the thing would come as a module and then butted together with the other one, they'd weld it up and it's all done. Rather than here, you build up this framework, then you run the pipe work through, and it's just a huge amount of dicking around. Huge. So this is one of the biggest innovations, and now that's the way LNG trains are built. Whereas once we used to call this is called stick build. So it's built out of components on site, everything's bought there, but you need a workforce of many, many thousands. This way you reduce your workforce by a huge amount.
Was the government angry at that though? Because you're taking
local content. Yeah, so that's called local content.
Yeah.
So if the government's interested in local content, we were interested in local content too. No, they weren't, because at the end of the day, you explain to them, look, this ain't going to get done. It was in the boom. There's not enough people to do this. There are other problems too. We didn't have enough room in town to get it done, because Rio, BHP, everybody was building stuff, and it was just nuts. And so there's about 5 camps around Karratha. We built a new one that would house Gap Ridge would house 2,000 people. I think it was a 2,000 man camp. Anyway, so you had to build these huge camps, and we still didn't have enough room in town to fit everybody. It was just nuts. So that was one of the biggest innovations that that was done in LNG, and I don't think anybody would build. I'll show you one of the modules. I'll put Pluto LNG modules. Let's see if that comes up with something. We would. See what that drags up. Bingo.
Oh yeah, I see.
See? So that whole thing has been delivered to site as a module. But look at that thing. So some of the modules, that's one on its ready to get shipped. So it would be put on a barge. There you go. It's put on a big heavy lift vessel. See?
That was going to be my next question. How did you deliver it from Korea to
well, it's just put on. It's put on barges.
Yeah.
So we had some modules that were just monstrous. I think they were up here, and it's from Foster Wheeler, who were our main contractor. There you go. So you can see them putting it onto the pictures of them putting it on the back of the heavy lift vessel. And that was basically, and there it is on the heavy lift vessel. That was how it was basically done. Huge amount of offshore labour and where was that? That's a shore project. But basically, that's how it was done, and that's taking an offshore technology. So if you have a look at something like that, which is that's Rankin, you can see, you might be able to see Rankin's actually built an offshore platforms have been built this way for many years now. You get the jacket, which is sitting on the sea floor, so that gets dropped onto the sea floor. So that's the jacket with its bracing and everything, and its legs are piled into the sea floor, and then they bring modules, and the modules get sat on top. So if you've got a deck that looks like that, and the modules are sat on top, the modules have all of your gear in them, and then you just hook them together, and then you've got a quarters, so you'll have quarters with a heli deck on it, sits off to the side, heli deck on top, and that's all modular. So offshore have been doing that like that for, I don't know, 30 years, just because you had to. In the old days, when they first made platforms, they were stick built. They'd bring out all the pieces and they'd weld them all out. And one of the reasons why you had to do that is you didn't have the craneage or the ability to ship hundreds of tons of module in one go.
Yeah.
That's changed. Now you've got cranes that'll lift 14,000 tons offshore, so huge cranes, and you've got similar craneage and methods of moving things onshore. So, it's now become feasible to do these things. But people hadn't made the connection. So Train 5 was the first time we'd done it, and no one had ever gone and built an LNG train that way. So we modularised it. It was done on the fly. We did it again on Pluto, and we did it a lot more, with a lot more thought. What they did with Train 5 is they took the stick build and just sort of turned it into a modular design. So it was very inefficient. Structurally, it was very inefficient.
Yeah.
But when they did the Pluto one, they thought about it a lot more. It's still inefficient because using a lot of the steel work goes into managing the self-weight and the transportation loads. So you can imagine if you've got to pick this thing up and it's huge spans and it's got to go sit on a boat and then it's got to come across the ocean with sea fastening and all of this kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's getting loads that, beyond what it would normally see in service. So they're built like brick shithouses. They are very, very heavy. So it's inefficient from a material point of view, usage of material, but from an overall cost effectiveness, use of labour, it wins hands down. It's the difference between being able to get it done at all, almost, and not getting it done. That's where it is.
That is the difference.
Pardon?
That is the difference.
Well, it is the difference, yeah. So, it can save you. It can save your project.
Yeah.
So you can get something done in a low cost labour environment, or lower cost, and actually Korea and that aren't that low cost anymore. But their shipyards and their fabrication yards are monstrous, and they just churn out super tankers.
Yeah.
And it's just an amazing thing to see. They just put that stuff out there. It's what they do all day long. Massive amounts of labour, huge workforce.
So quality.
Quality's generally pretty good. We did have some quality issues, so you got to watch it.
Yeah.
But quality's pretty damn good. You can't really complain. So we did have some quality issues, but and they held us up a tad. There you go. There's some.
Oh, that's it being made.
That'll be in the yard, yeah.
All right.
And you can see it's on great big wheeled carriers.
Yes. I see.
Civil engineers drag. That's a drilling rig. That's a mobile drilling rig. Something like what? So you can see that's under tow.
Yeah.
At that time. So there's the derrick. That's a Maersk rig.
And there's a helipad.
And there's a helipad. Yeah, remember that's floating and that does drilling. It's not like the Rankine platform what I showed you,
Yeah.
which is a production platform. All right, what else do you want to know?
I mean, that's all the questions that we wrote up.
Right.